This is the Heroes for Freedom podcast. I'm Rick Robinson. All of the stories we talk about here are available in these manuals that you see over my shoulder. Volumes 1, 2, and 3 of the Heroes for Freedom. Volume 4 will soon be released. Betty White, the beautiful patriot. She was a lovely and vivacious actress, still in her teens. Those who knew her saw her as beautiful on the inside, too. But then her nation went to war. Like many talented young women, Betty was still a teenager, had hoped that living nearby Hollywood would give her a better shot at making it on the big screen. But everything changed when the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor, forcing our country into World War II. In fact, the war caught Americans by surprise, forcing all to face some really tough choices. And Betty was no different, but she was patriotic enough to quickly decide to put her dreams of being a famous actress on hold. And she joined the American Women's Volunteer Services, the AWVS. This was a military support organization dedicated to assisting the U.S. Army on the home front. And this was a risky choice in often shallow Hollywood, where she had just started to work. Because young actresses get old, their opportunities fade as they age, and it happens quickly in Hollywood, it seems. So who was this patriotic young woman? Betty Marion White was born on January the 17th, 1922, in Oak Park, Illinois, an upper-middle-class suburb of Chicago, in fact. Raised during the Great Depression, she grew up at a time when families worked hard to make ends meet, and neighbors and communities, of course, leaned on one another for support, for help. These early years instilled in Betty a deep sense of responsibility, but also a compassion for the downtrodden, qualities that would later fuel her patriotic, humanitarian, and community service work. Betty White was 19 when war swept America. Like many fellow citizens, she felt a deep sense of duty. As mentioned, she joined the American Women's Volunteer Services, the AWVS, early on. In fact, she was one of the first to sign up. Though young and inexperienced, she was soon assigned the job of delivering mail supplies to American gun emplacements along the coast of California. Most Americans don't know that we were concerned very much at the beginning of the war about possible Japanese invasion or possible infiltration and sabotage along the American West Coast. So several organizations were assigned to man, monitor, and supply these security and military units that were stationed there. The AWVS helped operate mobile kitchens for servicemen. They filled aircraft spotting assignments sometimes and air raid warden positions that needed to be filled. Betty also organized social events for the troops. She spoke of these years with pride, but also humility, grateful for the opportunity to serve, aiding American military units preparing to deploy overseas, and those assigned to protect the homeland. She often commented, in fact, later years, that while she may not have been on the front lines, her work played an important role in boosting morale and supporting military activities that protected the home front. As well, the AWVS that she served was able to raise over $1 billion for the war effort through the war bonds campaign. This would equal about $21 billion today. A naturally vivacious and cheerful woman, she had the kind of personality that consoled and charmed all she met. In fact, she continued to write a number of soldiers that she had known after their deployments overseas, encouraging them during some of the most difficult periods of the war. Betty was remembered by many veterans who later reflected on her kindness, her positive charm, and dedication to serving her country during those difficult years. Betty White was a longtime supporter of the United Service Organizations, the USO, an organization that provides programs, support services, and live entertainment to American service members and their families. She participated in fundraising efforts for veterans, activities providing support for wounded warriors as well. After World War II ended, Betty returned to the entertainment industry. Though cast for a few movies, she was always on the lookout for opportunities and found her best openings in the new entertainment medium of television. In fact, later, she was known as the First Lady of TV. Her career on the small screen spanned many decades, earning her a place in the hearts of millions. Throughout her career, Betty White's television shows, from Life with Elizabeth to The Golden Girls, often included subtle but powerful themes of community, dogged resilience, individualism, in fact, but most of all, empathy, values at the heart of the American identity. From 1952 to 1954, Betty hosted and produced her own live daily talk and variety show, The Betty White Show on NBC. She was a rarity, in fact, at the time, a woman who insisted on maintaining creative control over her own weekly program. She even hired a female director, which was a first in TV and movies. Also, in a groundbreaking first for American network variety television, she hired and featured an African-American performer, Arthur Duncan. At the time, the network was drawing criticism from Southern audiences, making sponsors nervous, but Betty could see the talent and native appeal of the man, a highly skilled tap dancer and entertainer. Even though the network insisted she drop Duncan from the show, she refused, standing up to network executives. The criticism grew, however, when NBC expanded further nationwide. Southern audiences, Southern stations, and sponsors in the Jim Crow South during racial segregation all threatened to boycott NBC unless Arthur Duncan was canceled from The Betty White Show. In response, Betty told these nervous executives, quote, "I'm sorry, but he stays. Live with it." She then gave Duncan even more airtime on her show. But at the end of the year, the reason is still left suspiciously murky. NBC quietly canceled her series. Later, the show she had, Betty's Life with Elizabeth, a different show, was nationally syndicated from 1954 to 1955, allowing her to become one of the few women in television with full creative control in front of and behind the camera. The show was unusual for a sitcom in the early 1950s because it was co-produced and owned by a 28-year-old single woman who still lived with her parents. As luck would have it, she was fortunate enough to meet Lucille Ball at this time, partly because the show I Love Lucy and Life with Elizabeth were both being filmed on the same Culver Studios lot. The two young women quickly became close friends, facing the mutual challenges of tackling a male-dominated television world of the 1950s. They relied on one another through illness and personal loss, especially enjoying competing against each other a few times on several game shows. Betty White either starred in, this is amazing, or was a supporting cast member of over 150 movie and television programs. She was recognized as the longest-running actor in all of TV and received 8 Emmy Awards, plus many other recognition awards for a wide variety of accomplishments. At 17, back in 1937, she had been the first performer to appear on an experimental TV program, singing a song that was then broadcast on a tiny television screen for the first time in history. This was broadcast live. They didn't have a way of recording it. Truly the world's first woman of television. Betty White was widely known for her support of animal rights and conservation projects. She believed that caring for and properly managing the nation's natural resources and wildlife was a fundamental patriotic duty of all Americans. Her long association with organizations like the Los Angeles Zoo and the Morris Animal Foundation reflected her commitment to these worthy goals, of course. In 2010, the Screen Actors Guild honored her with a Lifetime Achievement Award, highlighting her decades-long career and her philanthropic work as well. While the focus was on her entertainment accomplishments, this recognition, in fact, underscored her role as a figure of national unity, compassion, and inspiration to young people, and she is very popular with many young people. Betty White died on December 31st, 2021. She was just a few short weeks from her 100th birthday. Her husband, Alan Ludden, who had died of stomach cancer on June 9th, 1981, so 40 years before, was the love of her life. It was in her own words, of course. Following his death in the 1980s, Betty never remarried. When she was asked, many times in fact, why she had not remarried, she said, "When you've had the best, who needs the rest?" Though she never had children of her own, she was mother to several stepchildren of her husband, Alan Ludden, whose first wife, in fact, had died of cancer back in 1961. We respect Betty White and consider her a great American hero, not because she fought on the battlefield or because she had saved someone by rushing into a burning building or a raging river. Certainly such people are heroes, and we honor them. But Betty's greatness comes from being a true trailblazer who would not give up, launching courageously into a new and later highly influential industry. Through it all, she was unwilling to surrender to her critics when faced with failure. She kept a cool head and steady hand when facing immense personal and professional challenges. She went the distance without losing her passion to succeed. More importantly, she was willing to lend a hand to those in need along the way, even when it wasn't popular to do so. She willingly put on hold a movie career as a young and beautiful actress, and she had begun that career, but so she could serve her country. And when the war ended, she could have given up, falling back on the excuse that many often gave that her time had passed, that she was now too old. But instead, like a courageous and entrepreneurial American, she assessed the changes around her and launched full bore into a new medium, live television, quickly mastering the skills that required. More importantly, along the way, she helped others, particularly those being purposely shut out from the opportunities she knew belonged to all Americans. Betty White, our beautiful American hero, an exceptional champion who represented the best and the brightest of the American spirit, a positive example to us all. Yes, Betty White, we love you. I'm Rick Robison, and this is Heroes for Freedom